about, oh, I don't know, maybe that long. No. Hello, everybody. Um, it's about 1100 UTC on the 7th of July, 2025. And I don't know where you are in the world this morning, and I just hope that everything's okay by you. It's kind of an interesting night for me. Watched a couple of movies last night. I know I haven't been on in a few days. Don't really anticipate a lot of people tuning into this one. But maybe sometime in the future, somebody might want to take a look at this and see what was on my mind in this moment. Well, as some of you may know, I've become somewhat of a shut-in. Not fun. I don't know what's going on with my hip. Yesterday, I was relatively, how can I put it? Relatively? I was still in pain. My legs are or have gotten quite weak, which is kind of alarming. But, given what I know about my medical condition with everything, it doesn't surprise me. This morning I woke up and my hips hurt. But over the past week, I've been doing a lot of thinking, a lot of remembering, a lot of mnemonics have come over my pike. Or come down the pike and got me to remember. Now, I've kind of titled this thing, What is Love? And I'm going to have to catch my breath and kind of focus on this. I know it sounds funny, but really the only way for me to do this is to fire up a cigarette, take a sip of coffee, take a look outside, which is kind of overcast this morning, and then kind of dive into this thing. So excuse me, ladies and gentlefolks, while I fire one up. Get used to it. Best I let this thing down a little bit, or else I go through them like they're nothing. And that's the other thing, I'm starting to run out of cigarettes. And boy, when that day comes, it's going to get to be pretty rough. It looks like some people have said hello this morning. Good morning, Elizabeth. And Nehemias says hi. Good morning. I hope you guys are having a good morning. I don't know how much I'm actually going to be looking at the chat and everything because I kind of want to focus on this stuff. And of course, the trolls have logged on. Yeah, so it goes. Always a few. Well, in the last chat that I did, I talked about Well, Hallie, 1984. And the funny thing is, I still love Hallie. The funny thing is, I love every woman I've ever had a relationship with. The funny thing is, I really love everybody. But love is a lot of work. There is a big difference between being in love and love. A big difference. Good morning, Jim. And thank you for the likes, everybody. We always appreciate that. We, because, this is not just about me, it's about everybody. So, let me tell you what happened. All right. After Hallie and I broke up, and I won't go into the gory details, I went to work for what was then Prairie Land Shuttle. Had a girlfriend for a little while up in the Les Al Peru area. And then, along in about 1988, I was hired on by General Telephone, GTE, in the Supply and Transportation Department. Somehow, amazingly, I was able to become a company courier. Now, I had known what a company courier for the phone company was since I was a teenager, and my mother worked for the phone company. Oh, and Roselle says hello. Good morning, Roselle. Thank you for the compliment. I appreciate it. But I don't think I'm the best, really. But at any rate, back to the story. I was hired on as a company courier, and I knew what a company courier was because back when I was in high school, my mom she was working splits, and during the second half of her split, oftentimes she would let me or have me drive her the 18 miles from Clay City over to Olney so that she could go to work, and then I could have a little time in Olney, which wasn't Clay City, to at least drag Maine, I guess. But there was a curfew here at 10 o'clock, and Mom, I think it was 9:30 or 10 o'clock, and I was underage, and I had to be off the road. So I would park in front of the phone company office here. And wait for Mom to get off work. I can't remember, it was like an hour or 45 minutes I'd sit there. And this truck would come and go, company truck. And I asked Mom what that was. And Mom said, well, that's the company courier. And you have no idea how important that man is. Well, I found out kind of what the company courier did, and I put it in my hip pocket. Along in about late 1987, a lady rides my bus back and forth to O'Hare Airport. I'm coming back. We have a conversation. I can't even remember the lady's name. But she recognized my name on the name board and asked me if I was my mother's son. Well, of course I am. And we talked about my mom and visited. Nice lady. And then a couple of days later, I got word from Lou White that this lady had called in and was trying to get in contact with me that was urgent. And the first thing I thought of was, oh my God, we lost somebody's luggage. Well, I called her and she was informing me that a company courier's position with General Telephone had come open because we had discussed that on that bus trip. Well, I applied for the job and I actually got it, which was a miracle of miracles. They normally didn't hire couriers off the street. It was a job that was that much in demand. Of all the positions within General Telephone, the company courier was probably the most trusted outside of the coin collectors. And even then, it was kind of a 50-50 thing. But the company courier was probably the most trusted individual outside of the normal operations of the telephone company. Remember, this is supply and transportation. This has nothing to do with how the phone company works, except for we haul the equipment and the company mail. Just the light stuff. But I got the job. So immediately I notified the bus company that I got a new job and I'd like to make a transition because they didn't really want me to leave, but it was infinitely more money and benefits and everything else. So I stayed on with the bus company, just driving on Sundays. It wasn't really a matter of needing the money. It was a matter of loving the job I did. So that was January of 2008, around 2008, 1988. And I had what was called the Northern State Route. And when I'd come back into Bloomington, I'd usually take a little bit of a break. We were permitted 2 15-minute breaks and a half an hour for lunch. Well, sometimes it's good just to get out of the truck and walk around for a little bit. And on the Northern State Route, when you got back into town, it was usually around, 9:30, 10 o'clock, something like that. And we had a 24-hour supermarket called Cub Foods. And I stopped in at Cub Foods, usually, because it's a big supermarket, all lit up and everything. And I grab a snack, maybe, a little carton of milk or something like that, and some cookies or whatever. Something. And then go ahead and stretch and finish my route. Now remember, back then I didn't smoke. It was like I don't know. I can't remember how many times I'd stopped at Cub Foods. And I'm going through the checkout. There's like one or two people ahead of me. And the woman at the checkout appears to be about my age. And here it is in the middle of the night. And there she is, just beautiful and smiling. And I kind of asked her, what are you doing here? Because I couldn't imagine anyone so beautiful having to work overnights. And she told me that she was a student at Illinois State University and she was finishing up her studies. And I said, well, what are you studying? And she said, music education. Now, all y'all out there who scoped around my channel and everything know that music hits me. And so I thought, well, what the heck? It had been really 3 years since Hallie, the girl I knew up in South Peru, that didn't really amount to anything. And so I asked her out. There used to be a place up in Normal. It was called Delgado's. It's a Mexican restaurant. It's up on the north side, up above College Avenue. And we agreed, and I took her there for lunch. Now, mind you, I wasn't thinking of anything more than just having lunch, just treating her to a nice lunch. But I had picked her up at her apartment down off Oakland Avenue, or not Oakland, but Washington Street. And I drove her home and walked her to her door. And I wasn't expecting anything. And then she asked me if I'd kiss her goodnight. Of course, it's the afternoon, but we were both working weird shifts. And I'll never forget the way she asked. And so I did. Over the next few weeks, I learned more about her. Oftentimes, I'd come into town. We kind of, how can I put it? She told me when she got off work, I'd actually skip going to Cub Foods, tie up the truck and tie everything down out on the west side of town, drive across town, and then we'd just sit in the parking lot or whatever. Sometimes we'd ride around in my truck, go find a quiet side street, just sit. And I got to know this woman. And not only was I falling in love with her, I was beginning to love her for what she was going to become. A music teacher. And I had remembered the role that music played in my life. And all I knew is that I thought it was absolutely beautiful and such a blessing that here I was for a moment being able to see someone's journey towards a dream of doing something for someone else that I knew had impacted me. But it was to be short lived. She was graduating, or actually had already graduated. There were some loose ends she needed to tie up, and would be departing. Well, there's this old saying about if you love something, set it free. And if it comes back to you, it's yours forever. And I was trying to be as mature as I could about it. And by the way, this is all before internet and cell phones. Well, cell phones are barely out there, but they're horrifically expensive. And so I let her go. That was towards the end of June of 1988. Summer would roll on. And then into fall. And in the fall of 1988, the telephone company basically gave me a choice. Either I stay with them or I go back to the bus company. It was a choice I didn't want to make. I loved both my jobs. I was working 6 days a week. I could care less. I was happy as a clam. I had the security of working for the telephone company, and at the same time, on Sundays, I was with the passengers. The traffic was light, and so was the burden. And the days were just gorgeous. Well, $1988 rolls into $1989. And it was in January or February of 1989 that my telephone rings. And it was her, the music teacher. And she wanted to know if she could see me again. She had taken a job outside of a little town up north, kind of a country school, and wanted to know if we could get together and have supper again. Not too far, really. It was actually, ironically enough, a town that I was going through every night. And I said, yes, we could. So we had supper. And we spent a night together. But not that kind of a night. Admittedly, we were intimate, but not too intimate. Well, I already knew I loved this woman. And now she's come back. But I'm very frightened. So, Valentine's Day was coming up. I knew where she worked, the school. And I went to the mall, Eastland Mall. There was a place called Mrs. Fields Cookies. And you could buy these big sheet cookies. I figured I'd buy a big sheet cookie big enough, not just for her, but for her coworkers, the other staff at the school, where she could share. Just not so much an I love you thing as much as an I'm thinking about you thing. I knew I loved her, but sometimes you just can't tell people outright you love them. You have to go slow. So I got the cookie and drove on up north to where that little town was during the day before I went to work. And the intention is that I was going to go, to the school, go to the office, just explain that I wanted to drop off a cookie for this woman and say, I hope you all enjoy it. I mean, for her to share it. I'm sure she will. And then get out of Dodge and go home. I actually didn't even intend on seeing her. Well, that didn't happen. I got to the school, checked in at the office. And of course, a woman like this, I'm not the only person that loves her. Everyone that comes in contact with her loves her. And they thought it was so wonderful that they asked a student to take me down to her classroom where she was holding class and have me deliver the cookie directly to her. And I thought about my own music teacher, Mr. Gingler, and how focused Mr. Gingler was when he was teaching class. And I know how intense musicians are, especially when they're teaching, because they want their students to be the best that they could possibly be. But I was stuck. I couldn't say no. I sure as heck couldn't take the cookie back to Bloomington with me. So I followed the student down the hall. And it was one of those glass doors that led into the classroom. And she said, there she is. And I said, yeah, I can see her. She said, you wait here. I'll tell her you're here. Well, it's not quite the top of the hour when they change classes. And I know I'm doomed. So the student knocks at the door and goes in. And the door closes because it's one of those things on an automatic retainer type of thing. I mean, I can picture this thing like it happened yesterday. And then I can see her look at me. And she is not happy. And then the student comes back out, and she says she'll be with you as soon as the class lets out. You wait right there. And so I did. When the class let out, she comes out the door and asks me, what the heck am I doing here? And I said, I'm delivering a cookie. And I hand her the box, and she opens the box, and she said, well, that's nice. I don't ever want you to bother me at work again. I'm like, okay, I'm sorry. I didn't know, and I didn't mean for this to happen this way. Well, I don't care. I don't ever want you to see you again here at work. And I could understand that. My mother was a lot the same way about us kids calling her at the phone company at work. It was verboten. We used to have a saying, you know, don't call me at work unless you're dead. But I had called her or called on her at work. And as I said, I understood and said farewell. As I was stepping out, through the corridors of the school, some people say, well, what'd she think? And I said, well, you got to ask her. And then I got in my truck, and it's like a 60-mile drive home. And she had given me a picture of hers. I think I had given her a picture of me too. It was very old. Both of the pictures were taken when we were still in high school. But it was something. And I took the picture and I put it in an envelope with a letter, and I sent it back to her. Well, that was pretty much the end of that. So begins the spring of 1989, early spring. Now time gets a little fuzzy. But if I recall correctly, spring rolls on towards summer. I move into a nicer apartment. And I date a couple of girls. Nothing drastic, just a couple of dates. I think at one point I actually signed up for a matchmaker even. Because there were some things I didn't quite understand, but we'll cover them before this thing is over. And then if I recall correctly, it was the summer of 1990. Late in the summer. When once again, my phone rings. And it's her. And you got to remember, I'm the guy that sent the picture back. Okay? And I just knew we were incompatible. Or at least I believed we were at that moment. That both of us were too mercurial. But still, I wasn't so much in love with her as had come to love her for who she was and what she was doing, what she had become. She had become a music teacher. She was teaching children about music. And of course, I remembered how music made a big difference in my life. How it opened up for me to become part of something greater than just myself. And I knew that she would be doing the same thing for children, other children, much like I was back in the day. So, like I said, the phone rings. She asks if I remember her, and of course I had. How could I forget? And she explained that she was in town. She was no longer at that school. She had relocated some distance away, but that she was in town and wanted to know if she could see me. Well, I had my guard up, definitely. I was like, well, I suppose I could entertain her. At least I could witness. Well, the reason she was in town is because one of her friends from university, I think it was getting married. And they were getting married at the chapel at Illinois Wesleyan University, which has a beautiful, or had a beautiful and quite large pipe organ. And she needed to rehearse. So here it was, like a Thursday, I think it was, and it was kind of hot. And she and I met at Wesleyan, and I got to hear her play this organ. I was dumbstruck. Absolutely dumbstruck. Afterwards, some friends of mine were having a party. Not that kind of a party, just a get together and cook out type of a thing. And I invited her, and we went. And lo and behold, we found out that we kind of knew at least one person in common. And then she had to go. And I figured that would be the last time I'd ever see her. But I had tried to keep it as platonic as I possibly could. My heart was breaking, but I let her go. So now she's come and gone twice. I know I'm far, far, far beyond in love with somebody. Perhaps the first time in my life, for the first time in my life, outside of my own family. I love someone. It's not so much about being sexually attracted or hoping to build a future together or anything like that. It was that I admired who she was, and I prayed that God would guide her in this. And I knew that all I could be was who I was, which wasn't much. So the summer went by, for the most part, and then late in the summer, the phone rings again. Hi, remember me? I'm going to be leaving soon, but I want to see you one more time. So we did. Yeah, I figured this was really going to be it. It's going to be the last time I see her. Because she's going to go off to Florida, and I've got no business in Florida whatsoever. Because that's where she's established herself. That's where her career's being built. That's where she's teaching. That's where she's found where God wanted her to be. And you have to let go. And I did. Oh heavens. People wonder why I smoke like a fiend. So a month or two goes by. And the phone rings. You guessed it. Hi. It's me. And then she tells me, I miss you. And I can't stop thinking about you. And I don't know what to do. She's 1,800 miles away. Oh. And of course, I feel the exact same way. And we started talking. And sometimes we didn't talk at all. Now, this is back in the days of landline telephony. You were billed by the minute or a fraction of the minute for long distance. Everything was done over wireline cable or early fiber optic. It was limited capacity. You paid big money for a long distance call. I'm working for the phone company. I get a concession. My phone bills were running over $300 a month just so for an hour that tenuous little connection could be made. And even though couldn't hold each other or hold hands. We knew that we were connected somehow. We just sometimes just listen to each other breathe. Well, I had 2 weeks vacation coming up. I'll say it was October, before the time of my mother's birthday. My dad's birthday was in September. The initial plans I had made that summer was to go see the old man in California. Been a few years. My dad could be somewhat of a jerk, but he was my dad. And his second wife wasn't so bad. I was blessed enough to have 2 moms. I loved Evelyn too. And besides, I could see some of my cousins. A couple of weeks. Maybe a little time on the boat. I don't know. Whatever. Just go see the old man. And I told her about it, and she said, would you maybe come down here for a couple of days first? And I was like, yeah, I suppose I could arrange that. I had a little money saved up. Figured I could fly to Florida for a couple of days, 3 days, and then fly from Florida to California. That was the plan. Had never been to Florida. Had my opinions about the place. Dad and Evelyn actually had a condominium or a timeshare or something in the same area where she was for some time, but I think they had let go of it, so it was what it was. But I had enough money saved up that I could get a hotel or something like that, and we could spend some time together. So I got on a plane in Bloomington, Midway connection. And mind you, at the same time, I'm learning how to fly. And back then, Central Illinois, everybody knows everybody else who's flying. And I was active in the Prairie Aviation Museum. My mother was too. So everybody knew everything. There were no secrets. So I fly from Bloomington on up to Midway Airport on the little puddle jumper, which was what I was kind of aiming to maybe learn how to do, fly one of those things. And this is before I found out about the arrhythmia and tachycardia. And changed planes, got on a 737. Beautiful, beautiful weather. Whole trip. Took off out of O'Hare, headed for Florida. Now, I'd never flown over that part of the country before. Never flown over the Appalachians, over Georgia. And back then, this is all pre-9/11. Captain or first officer, I can't remember which one, comes back, sees me. It's a little chilly up there. I'm wearing, a leather bomber jacket because it's chilly up there. I know what airplanes are like. They get cold sometimes. Besides, you always carry some sort of gear with you. You don't know what kind of weather you're going to run into, and it gets wet in Florida. So here comes first officer, captain. I think it was captain. He says, I hear you're a pilot. I didn't tell anybody. I said, no, actually, I'm a student pilot. He says, well, that's fine. That's fine. So, Mr. Biava, how would you like to come up on the flight deck? Like I said, this is all pre 9/11. They could actually do stuff like that back then. It's strictly verboten now. And I'm like, no, I'll tell you what. I respect what you do. I've been up in the air a few times, more than a few times. He says, oh, yeah, we know. And I'm like, yeah, you know, all right. And I think I'll just sit here. I just need to reflect for a while. But thanks. Appreciate the introduction and the opportunity. He says, well, if you change your mind, next 15 minutes, you're more than welcome. Come on up, take a look around. Well, hell, I knew what was up there. More buttons and knobs than I could ever keep track of. Radar and everything else. I didn't want to fly a 737. I wanted to fly a twin-engine turboprop. Something manageable, 20, 30 passengers. Not 90 or 100. I always liked flying on little puff jumpers. Nothing against him. He's a good guy. So we landed at Fort Lauderdale. And I got off the plane. First thing that hits you, of course, is the humidity and the heat. And it's a big, long terminal. Not big like O'Hare, but a big, long terminal. There's nobody in it. No one. She's not there. Now, the funny thing was that before I got off the airplane, now mind you, I didn't have a passport with me, but the plane was going to circuit. It was going to actually fly over to the Bahamas and then come back. And I could actually get off the plane at the Bahamas, stay inside what's called a port area, which would have allowed me to go up to the duty free and buy something if I wanted to, and then come back, get on the airplane, and fly back. And they had actually asked me if I wanted to do this, and I said no. There's someone waiting for me at Fort Lauderdale. So, like I said, I got off the airplane. I go into the concourse, and there's no one. And I wait. And I wait. And I wait for what seems like an eternity. I'm like, okay, well, I guess that's that. Better think about your next move there, Bruno. Or Kurt, because I was still Kurt back then. No, actually, I was Bruno, because I had changed my name during the summer of 1990. And, but I was still Kurt to her. And that was okay. There's certain people I still allow to get away with calling me Kurt. But if you call me Kurt and you're not one of those people, I'm going to catch you real quick. It's not because there's any difference. It's just that it's reserved for very special people. My family and people that knew me before. The only reason they actually dropped my first name is because you can't hear it in a loud room. People go, Kurt, right? And just kind of go, and it's gone. People go, Bruno, and that rings. That carries. It's distinctive. Not a lot of Brunos around. More and more, it seems, but not a lot, It sticks out like a sore thumb. I can hear that. My parents understood. My sisters, not so much. But, it is what it is. So I'm sitting in this terminal, and I've pretty much given up, and I'm thinking, okay, now what? I'm tough. I could bum it out in the terminal for 3 days. Catch the flight for LA. Away I go. And here she comes. And Here she comes. And I'll never forget her walk. So she insisted that I stay with her and not in a hotel. And I remember sleeping on the floor in her apartment. And we had kind of a whirlwind 3 days. But it's possible for a man and a woman to cohabitate and not have anything happen. You know what I'm trying to say? We held each other, we kissed, we hugged, da 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 da. But that didn't happen. You know what I'm saying by that? That didn't happen because she was a virgin. I wasn't. But she was so beautiful and so sacred to me that I wouldn't allow it to happen. Well, at the end of the 3 days, she begged and pleaded for me to stay longer. I was like, well, I've got a 2-week vacation. I suppose I could arrange that. So I thought I'd give it another week. Besides, never been to Fort Lauderdale. She had taken some time off from work. We decided to take a couple of road trips. She wanted to know if I wanted to go to Disney World or if I wanted to go to Cape Canaveral. Stupid me, I took pick Cape Canaveral. I figured it was going to be cheaper. I had money, but I didn't have that much. So we went to Cape Canaveral. We had some nice, very nice meals together. And I remember it was about that same time that I broached a question. Whether she wanted to have children someday. And she said no. Which in a moment I found kind of crushing, but at the same time I understood. Because the funny thing was that up until that point, I was open either way. Well, she introduced me to her sister and her in-laws and some of her friends. And like I said, things get a little fuzzy here because my memories get kind of funky. And the end of that week was coming, and she begged and pleaded for me to stay. In the meantime, Dad out in California is like, when the hell are you going to get here? We're waiting for you. And I'm like, kind of hoping against hope into talking her somehow into going with me to California so at least she could meet my dad and my stepmother. Well, that doesn't happen. And we have an argument, this woman and I. And I told her that I need to go to California because we can't just simply sit here in Florida and just not do anything. I have a family too. And she has kind of a breakdown. And I have kind of a breakdown. And she gets out this box of cards from underneath her bed. She would go to the card store and just pick out cards that she wanted to send to me. Well, at that point, I knew I had to stay. I couldn't quite figure out whether she was in love with me or loved me. But I knew that it was more than just something casual. After that, we went to Sanibel Island off Fort Myers. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful place. Magical place. I remember walking along the beach with her. I remember the ray that kind of showed up in the shallow waters. And I remember how she jumped and ran towards the beach. I was just standing there with, water up halfway to my knees, thinking, if you don't bother it, it's not going to bother you. But after that, we walked on the beach. I remember one evening we were on the beach on the East Coast off Fort Lauderdale. And as the sun set behind her and she looked out over the Atlantic and I looked at her, she sang to me the song Close to You. And she had to improvise because I have brown eyes. And I remember looking at hers, which were so beautiful green. And I remember telling her how they reminded me of olives. That olives are a very beautiful thing to me. Well, that didn't catch her too good. But yeah. Well, finally the time ran out and I had to go home. My dad was thoroughly upset with me, as was my stepmother. I guess they had every right to be. And early one morning, her brother-in-law came and picked me up and took me to the airport. And honest to God, I can't remember the flight home. Outside of the fact that it was raining when I left Fort Lauderdale and it was sunny when I got into Bloomington. But we knew that we were going to see each other again. Thanksgiving time, she was coming back up north to see her family and wanted to introduce me to them. It's a big step. I had no idea what was going to happen. Well, of course, we called each other a couple of times a week. And then finally, here comes Thanksgiving. And Thanksgiving arrives, and my family kind of understands, so I go and spend Thanksgiving with hers. Talk about a shock. Big family compared to mine. Close family. My parents had divorced. Her family had stayed together. Her family had grown. Mine keeps getting smaller. My head was spinning at the love that I was suddenly surrounded with. It's a shock. You see, unlike my mom and dad, especially my dad. Her family knew the value of family, of staying close. Their family was much closer to God. Well, we had Thanksgiving dinner and spent some time together, and then I had to take her to the airport at Midway and send her on her merry way. Oh, is that a long drive back from O'Hare or from Midway to Bloomington? Yikes. It had to be one of the longest drives I ever made. It was a cool, fairly crisp and clear morning. But Christmas was coming. More long phone calls. More $300 a month phone bills. This is starting to eat into old Bruno's pocket. And I don't know what to get her for Christmas. I don't want another cookie thing. Well, like I said, I had gotten to know her family a little bit. And by this time in my career, I actually had engineered or sharp shot, what we called sharpshooting. I had sharp shot and gotten a courier route that actually went through the town where her family lived. We didn't stop there, but we passed within a block of her folks' house. And although I can't remember if I ever stopped very much just to say hi, I can remember going by within that block and just saying a prayer of thanksgiving for what I was knowing and thinking about her and her family. And the buzz bomb in the park. In the school that was not that much unlike the little school that I went to. So in Clay City. We seem so much alike. Now here's the funny thing. I'd always known I loved her. I was afraid of really falling in love. Which is kind of backwards because most people in relationships, they fall in love first. And then it falls apart when they try to love each other because they don't know how. But I was scared, absolutely, yeah, that. So I called up her mom, not knowing I was going to get her mom. Anybody would have done. And her mom answered. She says, "Oh, hi, Kurt." And I said, "Hi." And like I said, this is all pre-cell phones. This is landline. So, the phone's like kind of just off the kitchen. It's a little kitchen. The kitchen's the hearth of the home. Well, it just so happened to be that everybody's there. It's lunchtime. And I said to her mom, I said, "I don't know what to get her for Christmas." Because I literally didn't. I was terrified. I knew what I wanted to get her for Christmas, but I didn't know what they'd think. In the olden days, you'd ask the mom and dad for permission to marry someone. And I wasn't really saying that, but I was praying for guidance. So I told her, I said, "I don't know what to get her for Christmas." And she said, "Can you hang on a second?" And I said, "Yeah." And that scene in the movies, and I'm going to pick up something here if I can make it without falling over. I still have one of these hanging on the wall as an antique. It's no longer connected. But just, you ever see that thing in the movies where, somebody takes the telephone. Oh, let me see if I can do this without falling over. But, they's talking on the phone like this, right? You say, hang on a second, right? And then they they take the phone away from their ears. They hold it up like this and they say, hey, Kurt doesn't know what to get her for Christmas. And in unison, they all yell back, get her a ring. And then, she goes, her mom goes, well, did you hear that? And I was like, yeah, I heard it. Okay, now you know what to get her for Christmas? I'm like, yeah, I know. And I'm mortified. I don't even know her ring size. We hadn't gone looking in jewelry stores or nothing. So I'm like, okay, what have I got to do? Well, I got to go get a placeholder. So I went to the jewelry store. Looked around, prayed, asked for a lady for guidance. Lady understood what the situation was. Said, okay, here. It was a traditional cut. I can't remember what the weight and clarity and all that was, but it was good enough. It was a placeholder. I figured sure as heck we'd take it back and then she'd get what she really wanted. But I got it. I had it gift wrapped. And I put it in a little safe that I had. And prayed. Christmas time comes around. And she's got like 2 weeks off. She flies in to Midway. And it's really rough weather that year. We're going through a cold patch and we've gotten some snow. And as it turns out, her dad kind of figured that I'd go get her and bring her home, which I knew nothing about. And he ended up having to go get her at Midway and bringing her home to where she lived, which was about 60 miles east of Bloomington, cross country. Well, she's home, right? She lets me know she's home. I've got a few courier runs to make. I stop by just long enough for us to sit and have a visit. And she could sit in my company truck for a minute and see what I did. 0.5 of a second, really. And big hugs and kisses and good night. And then right after that, I went over and kind of gathered her up. And I think we came back to Bloomington for a couple of days. I can't even remember the itinerary. It just, my head's just lost in this, but I remember the high points. But we went down to see my older sister, Lucy. And my mother had just bought the mobile home that I live in now. But it wasn't here. It was actually across the mobile home park. But Mom was going to be moving from Bloomington Normal to Olney. But we went to my sister's house. And the nucleus of the Illinois faction of the family, now mind you, this is my family, less my father and stepmother. Everybody was there. And here I bring in this angel. And everybody's just absolutely taken aback, as everybody always was when she walked into a room. God had a mission for this woman, and she was on her way, and somehow, little old me had her on my arm. Well, here's the funny thing. And it's kind of hilarious. My brother-in-law at that time was dealing in antiques. He'd go to estate sales and whatnot and pick up various pieces. And my older sister and he had bought a little patch in the country, little house, little house, and made it their home. And it was really beautiful. It didn't look like much from the side of the road, but it was gorgeous. It was tiny. You have to remember, just my brother-in-law and my sister. They didn't have kids. But it was tiny, but it was quaint, and it was filled with as much love as they could fill it. And one of the things that they had got was an old upright piano. Now, I mean old. You know, the keys are beyond chipped. Who knows how long it had sat in a farmhouse or in a barn or whatever, but they brought it in and cleaned it up as best as they could. But neither one of them or any of us knew how to play piano. So they'd never got it tuned. Who knows? You know, they might have even thought it was beyond tuning. Well, here she comes. This beautiful woman. This music teacher. And she says, "Oh, I see you have a piano." And of course, my older sister tries to explain, "Well, yeah, we've got a piano, but it's more decoration or anything. It's not even tuned." And she says, "Well, let me see what I can do." And I'll never forget this. In the course of about 30 seconds, she runs her fingers up and down the keyboard, trying each key, figures out the wrong notes, where they would actually belong, does the arithmetic and the geometry and the algebra in her head to make the transpositions, and then starts playing Christmas carols. On an out-of-tune upright piano. Well, you can guess what my family did, as musically inclined as we were. We were absolutely overwhelmed. Especially me. But everybody was. I remember my older sister was the closest thing to manic I had ever seen her. She's like, "Oh my God, I cannot believe this. This is the perfect Christmas." And that's what everybody thought. It was the perfect Christmas. Including me. Because I had that ring in my safe. Well, after we had Christmas down here, we drove back up to Bloomington. Spend a night or two there. And then we were going to go to her family's home. And I'm mortified. I am mortified. If you love something, set it free. If it comes back to you, it's yours forever. And she had come back 3 times. I didn't want another cookie incident, especially in front of her family. I didn't want her to feel pressured. I wanted her to be free. I was ready to let go again if I had to, or at least I thought I was. So while we were in Bloomington at my apartment, and like I said, you know, we're in the same apartment. You might be holding and kissing, but we had a limit. And she's a virgin. And so help me God, if it kills me, she's going to remain a virgin until her wedding night, whether it's with me or somebody else. Because I know that this woman is special beyond special in her gifts that she's received from God. So, at any rate, she has a little bag with some gifts in it, and I remember she gave me some very nice gifts, including some music, some souvenirs. But I was kind of running out of revenue. I pretty much sunk everything I had into that ring. And I said, well, would you like to see what I've got you? And she says, okay. I said, all right. You can't open it yet, though. It's not Christmas. But I'm going to let you know it's here. And she kind of drew her breath, and she said, okay. And I said, now close your eyes and cup your hands together. And she drew another breath, and she did. And then I reached over, and out of the safe, I got that tiny little box. You know how they are. They're about like that. And I very gently set it in its gift wrapping in her cupped hands. And as I did it, I remember she drew a breath. We know what little boxes mean sometimes, even when we can't see them. And I said, okay, you can open the box. Open your eyes now, but you can't open it. I just want you to know it's there. And she opened her eyes, and she looked. And then she said to me, I'm not ready yet. I'm like, okay. And so I took the little box out of her cupped hand, and I put it back in the safe. The next day or two are in somewhat of a blur. All I knew was this. Her family was expecting me to pop the question. And she had told me she's not ready yet. I might as well have been a Christian going into the Colosseum and being surrounded by lions, I was afraid of. But we went over to her family's home for Christmas, and everybody knew, but I couldn't say. I could only shrug my shoulders. Well, Christmas came and went. They gave me some very nice little gifts. I'll never forget her mother gave me a beautiful sweater, which I wore for a long, long time in the winter. I think her father gave me a pocket knife. And then I had to go back to Bloomington because I had to go back to work. So I went back to Bloomington. And the arrangement was she was going to come over to Bloomington, and then from Bloomington I was going to take her back up to Midway, where she would get on the airplane and go back to Florida. Well, the day that she was going to come over, the weather turned ugly. We already had a bunch of snow on the ground. It was overcast, raining, and a wind had picked up. And it was bad enough that by the time I got up at around 10, 11 o'clock in the morning, the local radio stations were already warning everybody to stay the heck off the roads, and that some of them had already been closed. So I called over to her family's home where she was to see if she had left yet, and asked them to keep her there because I didn't want her to get hurt in the storm. But what they told me was it was too late. She had already left, that they had tried to stop her, that she had taken her sister's car and drove towards Bloomington. Now you got to remember, by this point, I had already had about 2 million miles under my belt. I had seen a lot of things that were avoidable. I was like, okay. So I stayed at my house as long as I could before I had to go into work. But eventually I had to go into work. Because even though it was rough weather, we had to show up for work, if possible. So I slid my way across town on the screwy roads, went to work. And for the first time, and the only time that I can ever recall, both the manager over us at Supply and Transportation and our supervisor greeted us 5 couriers as we came in. And I remember them telling us that it's a bad storm out there. Yeah, you got to go out and try. But if you go out that south gate, and well, here's what we're going to do. We're going to leave the north gate open because we had a pass key to get it, security and everything. He says, we're going to leave the north gate open in case it freezes up. Don't want you to get caught out there, you know what we're trying to say. So if you go out that south gate and decide it's too bad, hint, hint, nudge, nudge, wink, wink, just come back in that north gate. It'll be wide open for you. Come into the warehouse, sweep the floors for a couple hours, log in your full time, go home. We'll pay you, no questions asked. That's the kind of weather we had. See, and they're like, you got it? And they're like, yeah, we've got it. It was a different set of orders, but yeah, we had it. So we loaded each other's trucks, and stopped at the fuel rack and got our fuel, and one by one, off we went. And I was the last one in the train. And as everyone else turned to the right to go back in the north gate, I turned left and started out on my run. Because I knew my run paralleled where she would be traveling back to Bloomington. It would take me through her hometown. so that I could stop by. So I could stop by and find out if they'd heard anything. I was about 2.5 hours late when I finally got into that little town. And as I came down the street, every single light in that house was lit. It was like 2 o'clock in the morning. 1:30, 2 o'clock in the morning. Whole family was up. I parked my truck, left it idle. You could do that back then. Went up to the door. Her mom let me in. We went through the house. And I asked, I said, has anybody heard from her? And they said, no. They were back there in the kitchen playing pinochle. That's what they do in that territory. And my gosh, they were rapping their knuckles so hard on that kitchen table I thought I was going to bleed. And I remember her mother saying, you know, Kurt, you could stay here. And I knew it was kind of funny, but I could kind of declare an emergency if I needed to in my log and say that it was just too rough for me to go out and say that I stayed there. Log off the clock and then resume the next day when I thought it was safe enough. But I knew that she hadn't called to let anybody know she got in safe. And I knew somebody had to go out there and cover that territory and cover both ends. I had survival gear enough to keep me alive in a cold truck. I knew how to do that. And I said, no, somebody's got to go out and look. I've got to go out. Something about me from the Marine Corps and from being a parks policeman, the fact that my father wanted me to go into the Coast Guard was kicking in. In the Coast Guard, they used to have two sayings. And I remember reading about them when I was young. The first one was, you have to do more and more with less and less, and pretty soon you find out you're doing everything with nothing. And then the other one was, you've got to go out when you're called. But nobody says you're going to be able to make it back. But you've got to go out. You know why that is. You have to try. Even though you know you might lose it all, you've got to try. So I went out in the storm and I tried. When I came around the bend at Secor, or not Secor, at Saybrook, there were 2 3-axle state of Illinois snowplows that were in the ditch. And I remember stopping my courier truck and asking them if they were okay. And they said, yeah, we're fine. Where'd you come from and where are you going? And I said, I'm company courier for the phone company. I'm headed back to Bloomington. And they're like, it's rough out there. I said, yeah, I know. I'll be all right. Don't worry about me. And away I went. I remember bucking snowdrifts all the way across on 9. I remember hitting them. I was making about maybe 30, 35 mile an hour, and you'd hit them. And they were about 2.5, 3 foot, sometimes 4 foot deep. And the snow would fly up and hit your windshield and everything, but you kept going. And in the distance, you could see the light of Bloomington. And then finally, you saw Bloomington. And you got into Bloomington, and the drifts kind of let up a little bit because the windbreak of the buildings and the trees. Well, of course, the first thing I did was I deviated and went down to my apartment. And there's a snowdrift up to my waist in front of my door. So I let myself in. She had a key to my apartment, but I let myself in and prayed that she'd be in there. And she wasn't. I went upstairs and I checked the answering machine. No voicemail yet back then. Nothing. I went back downstairs, pushed the snow away from my door so I could close it, because a lot of it had fallen into the apartment. Got it closed, went back out to the truck, got in it, sat for a minute, and remembered her friend that lived across Veterans Parkway from where I lived. And I drove over there. And I pulled up and I could see her sister's car was parked in the parking lot of that apartment building. And everything ran through my mind. But the thing that I remembered the most was her family, 60 miles away, worried sick. Because she hadn't called and she had gone out in the storm without. And they had tried to stop her, but I knew where she was. It would have been really easy for me to just simply call him and say, yeah, she's, I guess, here. I can see Marla's car. I didn't think about that. Because there was a voice that was calling to me and saying, you've got to make sure she never does that again. Because she's either going to get herself killed or get somebody else killed. And stress can kill a person. And her parents were up there then. So I got out of the truck, went into the apartment building and down the hall, and knocked at her friend's door. And her friend answered the door, and I said, I'd like to talk to Lynn. And then Lynn came to the door. And I reached through it, and I grabbed her by the wrists, and I pulled her through. And I remember I fell backwards as I did this. She fell kind of on top of me, so I held onto her wrists. And I said, I don't know who the hell you think you are, but don't you ever do that again, because you're going to get somebody killed. Do you have any idea what your family is going through right now? And she basically said that I didn't have any right to treat her that way. And said that I could go to hell. And I guess she was right in that. My heart started breaking. Actually had started breaking in those moments between my family's Christmas and her family's Christmas when she said she wasn't ready yet. If you love something, set it free. If it comes back to you, it's yours forever. And she had come back multiple times. But one of the things that kept ringing through my mind was during that Christmas time over there at her family's house, when her family was so confused and I was so confused, and she was having some of her friends over and was introducing me as her special friend. Yeah. And I'd already been so many women's special friend. I tried one more time to reach out to her before she went back to Florida, and she told me I could go to hell. And added, so be it. Seven years would pass. Another woman came into my life for a time. She was pretty special. She had 5 kids. But I was already a broken man. And I managed to screw that up too. I was alone in a house that I had bought, hoping that my father would help me. He would basically stiff me on it. I'm watching my boat sink. I'm off work because I basically had a couple of nervous breakdowns. But I'd never forgot about this music teacher. And I'd always prayed that someone who had more than I did, more strength, more resources, more luck, more everything, would come along and rescue her in a way, or at least be the man that I couldn't be. And that one afternoon, I decided to call her. And a man answered the phone. That was the last time I talked with her. I think 1995 or 1997. It's getting fuzzy now. She did decide to speak to me over the phone. And I'll never forget hearing her voice again. It was just like before. And I remember she apologized profusely that she had learned her lesson, and that she knew that she wouldn't have what she had at that time if I hadn't have done what I did. Not long after that, she sent me a little book. It's kind of an elementary school level music book on rhythm. She knew that I had been a percussionist and not a very good one, but she wanted to leave me with something. That was the last correspondence we had directly. I held on to those things for as long as I could. But they were gradually driving me insane, I thought. And then one day I decided to drive over to Milford with all those things that I had left and return them because I couldn't throw them away. I didn't return the music that she had given me. There was compact discs by Yanni. Those I gave to another friend who loved music and enjoyed Yanni, so I at least paid those things forward. That was around the year 2000, I think it was. Time rolls. 2006, I leave the telephone company. 2010, my mother passes away. My sister, whose house where that player piano was, develops cancer. I tried to go on and maybe meet somebody else, but it never worked. I remember one morning I'm sitting in McDonald's, and it's Christmas time. And the way the McDonald's up here is set up, you could see who's outside the window at the drive-thru if you sit with the old men's club up front. And in the pre-dawn and in the light, I swear I saw her sitting in a car waiting at the drive-up stop. And I thought, oh my God, what the hell is she doing here? Because here's the funny thing about love. It kind of has to do with being a Cub fan. You have to know what love is to be a Cub fan, because to really be a Cub fan, we don't care if we win or lose. We really don't. All we care is that there's a baseball game. There's some of us that's crazy enough, we'll root for the Cardinals to keep from having to win the series. We got a reputation to uphold, right? I mean, 2016 was one of the biggest disappointments I ever knew because we actually did it. It was tough in 2003 when we took the pennant. Well, by this time I knew that Lynn had met her man. And that, more importantly, he had met her. And I prayed prayer beyond prayer beyond prayer that he was able to do for her what I could not. But nonetheless, I'm sitting in McDonald's, minding my own business. It's Christmas time, and of course, now you know that's all full of emotional dynamite. And I swear, it looks like her in the drive-up. And I'm like, why in the Sam hell is she in Olney? I mean, the internet's out there. It's pretty easy to find me at this point. But I don't want her here. Why? Because I had been with enough women that I know how women usually think. And I knew that if she was here, well, you go kind of insane, you know? So I wrote a letter and I sent it off, and I think I sent a copy to her brother or dad, and I think I sent a copy to her husband, letting him know what I saw, or what I thought I saw. And I basically said to keep her away from me, because I really wasn't the same person. I'd started smoking. I'd left the telephone company. I'd been declared disabled. I had nothing, and still have nothing, that I could give. Years would go by. Like I said, my mother died. Then my father died. Then my older sister Lucy died. And then a couple of years ago, on Good Friday, he died. He meaning her husband. I found out just shortly afterwards. I would go online, not really stalking, just praying, looking for any little tidbit of information about her life, just praying that she was blessed, because she needed to be. She was a musician. She was teaching children. And then there it was the video tribute. Around 30 years of his life and hers. And I could finally see it. Not in words, but in images. And he was everything that I had prayed that she would receive in a man. I wrote a tribute to him, and I'd never met him. But I wrote a tribute to him on the tribute wall of his obituary, which was taken down, and I guess I can understand why. But I knew exactly what kind of a man he had to be for them to have the life that they had together. And like I said, I'm a Cub fan. Sometimes in life, even though you lose, you have to root for the other guy. Because by his strength and her gift, many are touched and their lives enriched in such a way that pleases God. That's why I wrote what I wrote. That's why I feel the way I feel. I still love her in a way that's far beyond infatuation. carry her memory into eternity. And I will thank God not only for her, and the gifts she shared with all of her students, but also for her husband, who gave her security and joy, comfort, and companionship, and aspired and reached a level that I never could if she had married me. Admittedly, she's not the only one I do that for. I pretty much do that for every woman I've ever been involved with. And some of my male friends, too. Actually, most everybody. If I ever made any great mistake in the whole thing, it was the fact that I coveted her and thought that she could be mine. She was never mine. She always belonged to God. And that's the thing. In our beings, in who we are, as much as we might be in love with somebody or love somebody, they never really are ours except in our memories. They belong to God, our monarch, our Lord, and our admiralty. So that's what love is, folks. It's not about winning. It's about giving things up sometimes so that they can do greater things for God. And then giving praise to God for the good times and the moments that we've shared with friends, with family, with those that we grew close to. So there you go. Took me about 2 hours. Explain what that was. I better run along. You guys probably have lots to do too. I hope maybe you've learned something if you haven't already or didn't know. I could be preaching to the choir for most of you that are watching this. But there's nothing left for me to say right now. But I love you. All of you. Thank you. Good luck. Godspeed.